There we go.
All right, we are live. Good evening. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but this is episode 3 of Difficult Discussions. I'm Johnny, and I've got a panel here of 2 people who are going to have a discussion, and I have a fact checker on hand as well. So tonight I'm going to play a loose moderator role. So I'd like to start with our previous guests who have been here before. Brandon, introduce yourself. Let everybody know who you are and what you're about.
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Brandon. Just average guy, working class person. If you think of your average redneck and then imagine the total opposite, that's probably me.
Fair enough. Vernon?
Vernon, week 3. I'm fact checker this week, and I'll be zip lip. I'm gonna be on my Max Kellerman this week. But just checking up on all the details. High school administrator, avid lover of sports, avid lover of people and developing and growing people educationally. So that's why I like these type of discussions.
And we love to have you. Yeah. And our new guest, please introduce yourself.
I finally came out of the comments, y'all. It's Stacey Deering, aka Professor D. I'm wrapping up my PhD in urban politics at Wayne State, and I teach in the political science department, and I am an advocate, spectator for all controversial issues.
Lovely. I think we're going to have some fun tonight. So the topic tonight was chosen by Brandon and Stacey, so I'd like to give you guys an opportunity. Brandon, I'll start with you to express what you're looking to discuss tonight.
I guess my main goal is just kind of hopefully pick up some information that I didn't know about different presidential candidates' standpoints. Hopefully get some decent facts out there that everybody can kind of take into consideration before going to the polls about a month from now.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, they say don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion. We're going to do that. Stacey?
Breaking rules. As a political science educator, a lot of people reach out to me just to kind of stay current on everything that's going on in our political climate. So we just had that hot debate on Tuesday. So I'm interested in just sharing different perspectives and understanding the platforms and the policy initiatives that were pushed forward.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so I will give Brandon the floor as the returning panelist to start off here. Your thoughts, on the political nature of where we are as a country with this new set of candidates. And I won't voice my opinion as a moderator. I will leave that to you. Go right ahead.
At this point, I will say I'm undecided. I will openly admit that in the last election, I did vote for Trump because I was absolutely tired of career politicians that really don't feel like they've done anything in the 20 plus years they've been in politics, and I really didn't feel like they were going to do anything as president. At this point, it's still a very tough decision. I feel like, unfortunately, the country is kind of stuck again, kicking between the lesser of two evils. I feel like there's other candidates out there that would fulfill a lot of people's needs, but unfortunately don't necessarily have backing to get their message out there for people to see. One of the biggest things that I've actually encountered recently involving politics is a lot of people saying Joe Biden is basically everyone's savior. It's going to be the country's savior, and everyone is racist because Trump is in office and all that. And one of the messages that I like to try and spread to people is nobody controls what any one individual person does. I do what I want to do because that's what I want to do. And as was stated multiple times, I'm just not free of the consequences of that. Trump being in office does not make people racist. If that person has racist tendencies, they probably had them long before Trump ever considered running for any kind of political office.
Okay. Can I ask you a question?
Shoot.
As a moderator, would you, based on how you feel, agree that maybe his presence and inaction on certain issues emboldens those races to be more active than they would be outside of the norm. Kind of like, take for example, when the first Rocky movie came out. After that movie came out, a lot of Caucasian people felt emboldened after seeing Balboa topple the great Apollo Creed and maybe overstep their boundaries in a lot of bar fights, and things happen. So maybe, yes, these people were or had racist tendencies prior to Trump becoming president, but when you take a guy, when clearly asked, do you denounce these actions, and you don't, maybe that gives these people a little bit more validation than they need to continue on that path.
So I will say, him not denouncing, I understand the point of trying to hold a middle ground and not exclude or include any individual person or group of people. I do personally think that in his shoes, like, I would probably just stay off of social media and out of the front of the camera, because the man truthfully is dumber than a box of rocks. I can't stand him when he publicly speaks or gets on social media. I do feel like a lot of people may be emboldened to show those types of actions, whereas before they wouldn't have as much, because of the fact that they take him not denouncing things like that as an open invite to act like a jackass. Pardon my French. But I don't think his either agreeing to support or deny support of a certain group really shows his true colors as where he stands as far as like being racist. I think he's just trying to hold a middle ground and not pick sides in general.
Fair point. Stacey, I'll let you counter on from that with your opinion.
He's come across as highly divisive, and a lot of times you'll hear politicians speak political jargon, and he doesn't. He's very clear and blatant in his content, so you don't have to wonder or try to interpret what he's saying. But what has kind of grieved my spirit a lot lately is when he keeps saying the Democratic cities, the Republican cities, the Democratic states, the Republican states, and saying the Democratic cities are being ran into the ground. It's chaos there. They're doing a horrible job. They're even doing a horrible job with COVID. And the division there is unprecedented, because you're the president of the United States. So that's every single state, every single city. You're the president, you're the leader of. So that divisive tactic there has really sparked more tension than we already have. It's like a compounded tension era right now, because we already have race relation issues. Now we have serious party issues, because just coming from my personal experience, at one point I really didn't have an issue being friends or cool with people who had different political ideology or views. That's fine. But it's coming to a point where it's so divisive, and his rhetoric is so divisive and so problematic that it's causing tension, where in everyday life relationships it's breaking those. You know what I mean? Like, he needs to be more about unity. And when he's asked about unity, he often says, we were really close to it before COVID. And I'm trying to figure out when that was, because I'm, looking back and I'm reading and I'm researching, and I can't figure out when we were really close to unity as a nation besides 9/11, which is before this time, obviously. So that's been problematic. Even with COVID, I don't know how you politicize a pandemic, because a pandemic is more of a humanitarian issue. It's about humanity. Like, we need to be worrying about surviving as the human race, no matter what color, background, social, economic background there is. So there shouldn't be no politicization around wearing a mask, or, deciding to stay at home, or deciding not to travel, things like that. So what I would like for him to do is focus on being more united, because you're the president of the United States, not the divided states. This isn't 1861 where we have the states of the Confederate States in the Union. And it's starting to feel like that, which is crazy, because we're in 2020 and I keep feeling like we're getting glimpses of 1960 and 1860. And that's been problematic. So, you know how some people say your silence can be complicit, right? So when he refuses to really speak about racial issues, it makes him look highly unfavorable. It makes him look like he's a racist, because he's been given opportunities. He's been given layups. Let me talk in burning terms for example. He's been given layups to say, I denounce white supremacy. I denounce hate groups on both sides. He's been given the layup to do that, and he doesn't do that. He keeps saying the far left radicals, Antifa, BLM. So what I would like for him to do is take the advice of his counsel, because I'm sure they're advising him on what to say and how to present himself to, have a favorable view with the citizens and the voters out here. So, that's my stance on it.
I feel like I agree with a lot of what you said. I think as far as like racial issues, coronavirus, things like that, I think it's not even necessarily on the presidential aspect of making it political. I feel like it's honestly more so a lot of people are already politically divided in their views. And as we get further and further in time with information being right at everyone's fingertips, whether it's true or false information, everyone is so quick to share information or share meme, which is what really got this whole program going. People sharing memes and information without taking 30 seconds to pull up Google and look and see how accurate it is, that it's continuing to divide things. And I will say, as far as the cities and states and him saying, Republican states, Democrat states, I do kind of wish that would stop. I do feel like in some instances when he is talking about that, he's not necessarily completely wrong, but those are things that can be left out because they do create more division. You don't have to say this Democrat state or that Republican state. You can say California is doing this and it doesn't seem to be working well, whereas this state is doing this and it seems to be working well, instead of saying this Democratic state is not doing a good job and this Republican state's doing a great job. Instead of creating more division by doing that, just lay it out as a state by state instead of trying to politicize it. As far as like the racial issues, again, and I've said this, I think almost every episode, a lot of far left, I guess you would call them, people, based on driving a truck and having a beard and listening to country music and enjoying guns, would assume that I'm immediately racist. In fact, I've had conversations with people on Facebook where they're flat out calling me that, and they've never spoke to me a single time. And being able to have Facebook, Twitter, and all those kinds of different avenues, and people being able to do it from their home or at work on their phone, there's no way for them to face any kind of consequences for them just saying something like that, other than you making them look foolish by saying, yeah, that's not who I am at all. But what does it really prove? And there's a lot of division that's spread by the media. There's a lot of division that's spread because social media is easy to say whatever the hell you want to say and get away with it. And a lot of people use those platforms to politicize everything instead of just taking a person as a person by person basis and everyone having different views on things.
Well, like take for instance your situation where someone flat out called you racist. What was the context? Like, what had you said something or posted something, or what led them to say those things?
So someone had made a comment about the debate the other night. I'll be the first to admit I didn't even watch it because, pardon my French, I knew it was going to be an absolute shit show. You have one person that's a businessman and not a politician that should never be on camera publicly speaking. And you have another older gentleman, Joe Biden, that I feel like he's not always all there as far as like being able to think quickly and respond to things the way that he necessarily should. Like, I've seen some interviews where somebody will ask him a direct question about, for instance, like weapons, and he'll go on a tangent talking about something totally different. So I did not watch that whatsoever. But they were talking about the debate, and someone had mentioned Trump being racist. And I said, I want you to understand, everyone makes their own personal choices. People are who they're going to be. Whoever the president is doesn't determine whether someone is racist or not. If you want to sit there and bring up the fact that Trump, doesn't denounce certain things, look at Joe Biden. I think it was back in the 70s. I forget the specific year. He straight up was against desegregation of schools because, in his words, he did not want his kids going to school in a racial jungle.
I'm sure Bernie picked up that information.
Yep. Looking.
So, I mean, if you're going to judge one person like Trump by saying he won't denounce a certain group, so that makes him racist, even though he hasn't also said, I support them, you have to judge both candidates on a level playing field. If you're going based on the history of people, you can't just look at one person's history and completely ignore another one.
Okay. Stacey?
So Biden will probably be considered to get like an automatic pass because he was the vice president to the first black president. So I just want to put that part out there.
Right.
And then I also wanted to talk about, so we just mentioned how sometimes silence is complicit, but if you just study a person's actions, because, you know, a lot of times we say it's not what you say, it's how you act. His actions don't come across as someone that is all about equity and equality across the board in every area for all races. It doesn't come across that way. He doesn't come across genuinely in that way. So when you hear him make certain statements, like this particular statement, this was a tweet he made where he basically said, I'm going to paraphrase it, but he basically said the suburban white housewives are voting for me because I'm going to keep their towns and cities safe from low income housing. Now, low income housing is code for minority housing, right? So when you hear that, that comes across as, well, that sounds discriminatory. And discrimination is kind of a branch from racism. So it comes across as he supports being desegregated. He supports being segregated, and his tactics are divisive and have a racist background or undertone to it. That's how it comes across. And even if he's not, his actions just express otherwise. So he has to be cognizant of how he presents himself, what he says, and how he moves. And he honestly, he moves unapologetically and unequivocally. Like, he literally told us who he was, showed us who he was, and stood by that. So I can't say that I'm confused by who he is, because he's, you know, honestly been showing us who he is. Now, both candidates actually came up with a plan targeting the Black community directly, because they both realize that it's racial tension in our country, even if one says it more than the other. Because sometimes when people question President Trump, do you believe there's systemic racism? Do you believe there's race issues? And he says he doesn't. And one time he said, I hope there's not. And it's like, how can you say that when we have protests, riots all over the country, we have issues with police brutality? How can you not acknowledge that as the leader of this country that's dealing with a double pandemic, right? Because racism is a pandemic itself. It's a 400+ year one, and then we have COVID. So how can you not acknowledge those full-heartedly? It's not something to shy away from. It's not something to sugarcoat. It's not something to BS around. You need to actually tackle that straight on. Now, regarding other people being considered racist because you support a particular person, that part, I can't just stereotype or lump people together. You know, it becomes difficult because you wonder, okay, how can people support a leader like this of a country who is blatantly this way? That's not good for the country, because a president's job is to focus on the social welfare of the country, what's best for the country, the majority. Whereas he's a businessman fundamentally, so he focuses a lot on economics. And while economics is important, humanity comes first, because without humanity, you don't have economics. So you need to, you know, get your things in order and prioritize. So that has become an issue. And another issue, and this might be a sidebar, is that he appears to lack empathy. So if you lack empathy, you don't understand how important humanity is right now. We need to figure this out as a nation. We need to figure out how to get rid of all of these social issues that's plaguing us. So that has to be first. That's why we're so divided. You know what I mean? Like, the tension is so high because when you hear him give a press conference or a press release, his commentary is unfavorable. You know, he has opportunities to be presidential, to be, you know, unity oriented, to push forward a positive agenda, a solid plan, and he typically fails to do so. So it comes across as unfavorable. Now, I'm not saying that he is just the worst racist and he is a national supremacist, but when people say that, I understand why, based on his actions and his history. It's not out of question why people are saying that. You know what I mean? It's just, when you become the president of the United States, I almost feel like you need to take some etiquette classes, because it's a certain decorum you need to have about yourself as the person leading a country that's diverse and that has a lot of issues, and that's supposed to be a powerful country in our world.
Now, would you also agree, though, that taking a brash standpoint in how you present yourself in a lot of ways validates people who share those feelings and act that way with, hey, here's a guy I can identify with. Here's a guy who tells it like it is and has little reproach for how people react to that. And that's who they claim to be, you know, standing on their shield of, quote unquote, being an asshole. Now my president's also an asshole. So I feel better about being an asshole because the top guy is an asshole. So in a lot of ways, I feel like he perpetuates that image because he knows that it draws the people he wants support from in. You know, as far as the denouncing the racism thing, you know, yeah, okay. So if a Klan member stands up in the middle of a debate and says, "Are you cool with me?" he should probably say no. Even if he is, you can be behind the scenes in support, but, you know, hey, publicly we have to keep this on the low. So the fact that he's unwilling to bury that stuff and essentially stand proud, like, hey, no, this is what I'm doing, this is where we are. Because when, Brandon, you say he's not supporting it nor denouncing it, but yet he tells the Proud Boys to stand by, that sounds like support. And I'm really curious how you feel about the Proud Boys and their activity, because everyone has a lot to say about Antifa and Black Lives Matter. Well, here's a group technically doing very similar things, and they're being exalted for it. So, your take.
I'll be 100% straight with you. Besides today seeing a couple of Facebook posts, I had never even heard of the Proud Boys. I'm assuming that it's a group of people that are claiming to be patriots and patriotic and do whatever they have to do to defend the country beyond being, you know, military or police forces. One of the things I did see a lot of posts on today involving the Proud Boys was, you know, them marching down streets in cities where there's like riots and looting and stuff like that. And a lot of people were saying, okay, well, it's not just white people. There's more than just white people walking in this group with them to do these things. Antifa, no, I personally don't agree with them. I understand what their original message was, you know, anti-fascism, but to go into, what is it, Washington, Seattle, or whatever, and think that you're just going to take over a city and say screw the government, and then all of a sudden start realizing that, oh, well, we need medical care and we need food and we need water and all this other stuff, but screw the government, we don't want anything to do with them. It's like, okay, but kind of sounds like you need them. And then, you know, as far as BLM, the message Black Lives Matter is amazing. You know, it needs to be spread far and wide. As far as I'll call it an organization, even though they say that it's not an organization, it's, you know, loosely run by different chapters or sections of people. I don't necessarily agree with the group of BLM because I feel like it's honestly just a money funnel for Democratic candidates for different positions. I agree with the message. Proud Boys, I don't know enough about them to really say too much, but I feel like they're probably overstepping their bounds as far as thinking that, you know, they need to defend this or defend that, or, you know, walk around with guns and, you know, show intimidation tactics, I guess, to try and control certain areas. Like, that's not your job. That's what the government and the police are for.
So you say you don't know a lot about the Proud Boys. One of their goals is to monitor the polls. And that would mean being a show of force at the polls to what they say maintain order. But unfortunately, it does come off like intimidate people and potentially shy people away from going to the ballots. Now, if your goal is to not have people vote by mail, I don't understand why you would tell people to stand by to intimidate others doing so publicly. Because again, that seems like a conflict of interest. And bottom line, you know, they're not the police. You know, if I'm walking down the street and a Proud Boy wants to stop me, that's not his right to do so. So you're causing conflict, which could breed violence, because I may not be intimidated and I may not be willing to comply, and I don't have to comply.
Right.
So, you know, I don't want to take too much away. I know I'm supposed to be moderating, so I'm going to bounce back to Stacy and let you reply to what he said. I got to be fair.
You want me to jump in
Okay,
with
well,
Oh,
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
Vern.
You got some facts to check. Let's
Yeah,
do
well,
it.
I was just looking it up too. So go
some?
ahead.
I just wanted to jump in with a little bit of info, and this kind of ties into some comments just about the three organizations that Brandon mentioned. FBI Chief Chris Wray actually referred to Antifa. He said it is not an organization, but that
It's an
it is an
idea.
ideology.
Mhm.
Because Antifa is short, as you kind of mentioned, Brandon, for anti-fascist. So
Mhm.
it is an ideology of regular American citizens that agree in anti-fascism. Um, as we know, Black Lives Matter is an organization, but it initiated as a movement after the killing of Trayvon Martin by George Zimmerman. And the Proud Boys are detailed as a far-right, neo-fascist, male-only organization with ties to white supremacists that promotes and engages in political violence. That's just kind of the short summary of those three groups, organizations, ideologies, all in one.
So a neo-fascist group.
Yes. Do we need to break down neo-fascist?
I think you should.
Neo-fascist, neo-fascism is a post-World War II ideology that includes significant elements of fascism. Neo-fascism usually includes ultra-nationalism, racial supremacy, populism, authoritarianism, nativism, xenophobia, and opposition to immigration.
Xenophobia, if you're not familiar, is the fear of people outside of your nation. So, like, if I was fearful of Canadians, I could be considered xenophobic because they're not American. So, okay, that is some information to levy, but I will let Stacy take the floor here and go from there.
Yeah, so I think we've struggled with separating the Black Lives Matter movement and the actual point of it from the organization. So we definitely have to do that. The organization is a separate part from the Black Lives Matter movement and the reason of it, right? Because we've seen all over the nation how we've been dealing with a lot of police brutality and just discrimination in all areas, period. So that's been an issue. So when they asked, so during the debate, they actually, talked about racial issues. And I have some notes here about that where they asked, Chris Wallace was asking both of them about racial issues. And when Biden was asked about it, I'm going through my notes because I had to actually read the transcript because I watched the debate, but it was very difficult to decipher the raw content that they were saying. It was some points you can hear, some you couldn't. So I actually had to go through and read the transcript to actually pull out the content on the topics that they talked about. So Biden actually addressed issues of white supremacy. He acknowledged the issue of the disparity of the impact of COVID between races. President Trump focused on law and order as a remedy to the issues we're having with the racial tension in our nation, meaning if we had law and order and we sent in the military for all of those protests that had spin off riots and looting, the country would be better, those cities would be better, those cities are out of control, meaning those democratic cities, because that's how he addressed it. So he claims that the radical left needs to be addressed when asked about the Proud Boys, and he told them to stand back and stand by, which literally gave them the go to come to the forefront because instantly after the debate, they started really going all over social media with shirts and saying, we're standing by, we're waiting, our president has given us free range. So this incites more racial wars. And that is my fear because we're going back to 1861 if you're inciting a racial war, because we're going back to a war about race and rights and the issue of equality and equity. So that's an issue. So Biden said that he would like to create a task force to actually address the issue of systemic racism and systemic injustice, and he acknowledges that it exists. So one of the issues that I see President Trump have is that he does not acknowledge that systemic injustice and racism exists. He, already said that he's basically banning diversity training for federal employees. He said that he felt that the training that they were provided, which was focused on critical race theory and focused on talking about white privilege, he said it was racist. He said it was anti-American. It was teaching people to hate America, and that it was not right. It was sick, and he was not standing for it. So if you refuse to have racial sensitivity training, conversations like we're having right now would be banned.
Right.
Which is problematic, because the only way to understand the racial tensions we have in this country is to sit down and have these type of conversations so you can see both perspectives and y'all can come to a common ground to make progress. And the fact that he wants to take away something that's very important to getting rid of a critical issue in our nation right now, that also creates the image that he's a racist. You know what I mean? Like, these actions that he's taking, these press conferences he's doing, these press releases, these statements he's making that you can't take back because it's here. Once you say it, it's out there. You can't erase it. So once he says these things and makes these moves, it comes across as racist, unfortunately. It doesn't come across as you're for the American people, because all of us are American. It doesn't matter, you know, what our racial background is. We're all American. We all deserve, you know, the rights of our privileges, liberties, just all of that. And that's an issue. So if you want people to not think you're a racist, if you really want to promote peace, because he said it during the debate, he said, I want peace. Tell me their names. I'll denounce them. So they start saying names. Chris Wallace started saying names, and that's when Joe Biden said Proud Boys. And that was his moment to denounce it. That was like a pivotal moment right there. Now, he's had other press conferences in the past where he said, I'm denouncing it, and then he doubles back less than 24 hours and says it's good people on both sides. And then the next day after the debate, when he was being interviewed at the White House, he had another chance to correct what he said at the debate. And he said, I don't know who the Proud Boys are. I don't know what you're talking about. Like, he literally said that. So that's problematic. So it's just difficult. It's really difficult. So if you're an undecided voter and you watch this debate, you're more confused than you probably was going into the debate, because it was so chaotic. It really was a shit show. But if you don't want to take the time like I did, because my inner nerd came out, to read the transcript, then you lost the content. So America took an L after the debate because we didn't get what we should have got, which is a firm stance on their platforms. You want to know,
we gained nothing.
Where do these candidates stand on these pivotal issues that we're going to vote on in less than 45 days, literally a little over 30 days. Where do they stand on this so we can have a better understanding and a better idea? So that's problematic. And then when you see a president who can't have a civil conversation, that's problematic in itself. So it's hard. I know a lot of people are like, I don't even want to vote. I'm going to look at these independent candidates to see what they have to offer, because I don't know how I feel about either candidate. And I know, like you were saying, Brandon, that you feel sometimes when Joe Biden is giving an interview, he's lost. I do know that one of the side effects of having a stuttering condition, because he has one, is that your mind thinks faster than you can speak. So sometimes you may have to take a moment to catch his thoughts to properly address the question. So I know that happens too.
Now, I guess one of the things that I've pointed out to a lot of people, or not necessarily pointed out, but asked, and I'll ask the same of you, is one of the things that you have brought up is the fact that, you know, Trump doesn't necessarily support these people openly, but he also doesn't just willingly denounce them. Take away all of your current thoughts of how the country is currently acting. And the main question being, would you rather have a president that doesn't support or denounce, you know, these racist groups and isn't openly saying racist things, that has done well with our economy as far as jobs and people having jobs, making money, being able to support and provide for their families and purchase things that they may have not been able to do before? And then you look at Biden, who probably does have some good intentions, which I would hope that every presidential candidate does, but has openly in the past, including the not wanting to desegregate his kids' schools, photos of him riding in vehicles with KKK members, and even recently in some of his, you know, public interviews that are on camera, some of the things that he said that come off as relatively openly racist. Who would you rather have? Someone that is kind of trying to hold that middle ground and standing by it and not accepting or denying, racial groups, or somebody that, has been in office for 30 plus years, as far as like in politics, really hasn't done anything life changing for the country, and has openly said some things that are relatively racial.
Well, I mean, you take that for what it is, though. You're talking about someone making a racial statement in a time when making statements like that were more acceptable because that was the status quo, and change. And some people were not in support of desegregation. Absolutely. And from that standpoint, you go back from so far in the past, and you have to recognize that people can change, people can grow, just as you yourself has stated that you have in these conversations. So it is very possible that where he could have been misguided 45 years ago, that maybe he has taken some advantage to expand his mind and learn some things and change his perceptions. In addition to that, you also take the standpoint of he is saying today that he is denouncing these things and that he does not support these things, whereas Trump seems very hesitant to openly do so. And one would question, why? Why are you hesitant to denounce racism? Because, I mean, we're talking about white supremacy. White supremacy is stating that you are above all else and that everyone should be beneath you. So in a country, as a president who's supposed to be for everyone, how can you not denounce that type of thinking? Because it would be anti-American, as he likes to say a lot,
Right.
So that's what makes it difficult. You take a guy, yes, he's made some mistakes in the past, but he is showing that he's trying to learn from those mistakes. And then people like to bring up the tagline that he hasn't accomplished anything with his time in office. He's never been president, and he's running for president now. And we acknowledge that as a president, you can do certain things. So to say he hasn't done something presidential when he's not a president really doesn't make sense. And I'm sure if you actually researched his record, you would find that there are some things that he has done that have benefited, because by that line of thinking that he hasn't done anything, really the only three presidents you could ever say have would be Washington, Lincoln, and Roosevelt.
Right.
Don't
So
forget
I'll
But-
throw in a couple, because I know Brandon's asking some questions kind of in his commentary. Just a couple of fact check things, kind of more information. Doc, you brought up what happened in Charlottesville, and a lot of social media are posting Trump denouncing the KKK specifically, all the way back in 2016, and then seeing his comments after the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville in 2017, where Donald Trump referred to there were good people on both sides, referring to the white nationalist group that were protesting the taking down of a Confederate statue.
but only one side wound up killing somebody, though.
Yeah, the
Can't stress
person,
that out.
the person that you're talking about, Brandon, his name is, sorry, got to pull it up again. Senator Robert Byrd, who is a Democratic senator from West Virginia. Robert Byrd at one point was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. The picture of Biden at a rally and in the car with Byrd was from 2008 at a rally for then Senator Barack Obama running for United States president, where Robert Byrd was in support of Barack Obama and was a member of the Ku Klux Klan in the 1940s. And through his life in politics, he voted. They do still say he was kind of flip-floppy. He filibustered during his time in the Senate for the 1964 Civil Rights Act, but he voted for the 1968 Civil Rights Act in favor of that. So, yes, Robert Byrd was a former member of the Ku Klux Klan. It's kind of taking note to also what you're talking about with Joe Biden's comments in 1977. Byrd was a KKK member and denounced every element of how he used to live. And that was part of his support for Barack Obama in 2008.
Right.
So that's the fact check that is thrown out there that, yes, it was a former KKK member with Joe Biden, but they kind of missed like the last 50 years of his life.
Right. Now, I need some of your fact-checking skills real quick. One of my African-American friends, he's a very, very good friend of mine. He actually posted on Facebook today, and I don't know how accurate the comment is or if it was taken out of context or how recently it was said. I'm assuming it was recent. He posted on Facebook, Biden said, ... poor kids are just as good as white kids.
I know exactly. I know.
Yeah, I remember that.
About.
Now, does that not come off as like passive aggressive racism?
Categorizing black or poor is synonymous with black. That's what you're saying. Kind of what
Right.
Doc mentioned earlier.
Exactly.
Is coded language where you refer to socioeconomic status, but a picture
Right,
in
like
your head.
suburban white wives and not having low income housing moving into those suburban neighborhoods.
Correct. So
It's a very similar statement.
I'll look it up. I'll be right back.
Okay, I'll touch on a little bit. I do remember when he said that. So what he was saying was that poor kids, in which poverty doesn't really have a race, but it just is the spirit. It's very higher among minorities, obviously.
Right.
But what he was saying was that black kids are just as good as white kids, meaning they should have the same opportunities, because in most cases they don't, unfortunately, because of how our system is set up with, even though we are not segregated by law, we're still segregated by economics. So a lot of times you'll see more minorities poverty stricken and have less access to resources versus their suburban peers or their white peers. So that was my interpretation of what he was referring to. He said it in simplistic terms that came across as vague, so it could be read either way. But that's the way I read it from me being an urban political teacher. Like, I teach urban politics, and I've had to read this type of content for years now. So, yeah.
By the way, Johnny, she's a ringer, and this isn't fair, by the way.
I'm a ringer. What do you mean?
You studied this like you're about to have like a PhD in this, and I'm just like a random guy that did not go to college, did a little bit of dual enrollment.
It doesn't matter. We have this is an equitable conversation because we're bringing great
vote is a vote.
Right.
Vote. An American vote is an American vote.
Yes.
But I'll kind of give a little context to also Joe Biden's comments. He was speaking at a town hall event in Des Moines, Iowa, hosted by the Asian and Latino Coalition on August 8th, 2019, where he did say poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids, therefore implying that economically disadvantaged persons are all non-white. So that's kind of the hue there, where he's not even talking to a group of blacks. He's talking to Asian and Latino Coalition,
which are people of color as well. But
it gives the full disclosure, or it gives the look of, well, white people are not poor. Period.
Which is inaccurate, because of course white people are poor as well. It's just that it's blacks, minority, and other minorities are more disenfranchised and experience poverty at a higher rate, unfortunately.
But that really goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, you take a situation, because we could both equally say, okay, yeah, they both have racial tendencies, for sure. But it really boils down to the perception of those who view them. And you take a guy like Trump, who will basically take inaction, which in itself is validation to a lot of people that want to do bad things. And then you take a guy like Biden, whereas even if he wants to call me the N-word behind my back, he's not going to do that publicly. And if someone did that publicly, he would shun them for it, because that is the status quo of where we are as a country now. It is not acceptable to do those things. So regardless of how they may feel in their personal lives, you have one guy who is essentially allowing atrocities to take place. And anytime that atrocity is levied by someone who happens to be white, there are good people on both sides, there are bad people on both sides, but you don't hear him say those things in relation to Antifa or Black Lives Matter, because we could all agree that I'm sure there are some good people in those organizations. There are people probably in Antifa that actually had good intention and wanted to do good things,
Right.
but it's overshadowed by the people who do bad things. So he's hardline. Black Lives Matter is a terrorist group. You know, we got to shut it down. We got to get this done. But then when he is asked about, you know, situations like the Proud Boys, he doesn't have that same energy. You know, it's now we have to have patience. We have to allow them to do what they need to do, stand by, you know, but then say you don't know who they are. Why would you tell a group that you're unfamiliar with to stand by? You know, so that's, I think, where a lot of people are taking issue, because even if Biden is racist, because, I mean, he was shoulder to shoulder with Hillary Clinton, who said the black kids need to be, you know, brought to heel, you know, a lot of racist stuff. You know, the Clinton administration hurt a lot of black people as far as prison sentences and things of that nature. So we don't forget those things, but we still recognize the fact that one president is going to allow people to do terrible things in his name and not shut it down, whereas the other guy would not do those things. And that's questionable. That's dangerous, because if you're just inactive while the other side starts fires, there's still fires. So
Right.
you need to put them out. So I think that's where a lot of people have issues. So it's not necessarily that we don't think that Biden may be racist or has racial tendencies. It's that he is more of a politician to quell those things as far as the people. You know,
Right.
because you can
He's
be racist.
He's better
thing.
at politically
Yeah.
speaking and coming off as like a for the people kind of person, whereas Trump's not a politician. Now, my other main thing that I really wanted to talk about is moving. If you really consider those two, and we move beyond like the racial aspect, you were talking about economics, Doc, and one of the things that, you know, a lot of people will, I'll even say, crutch on, is the fact that the economy, since Trump has been in office up until coronavirus happened, was going extremely well. There were a lot of people working that weren't working before. There were a lot of people making money, buying homes. Housing market is absolutely crazy. A lot of people are like, oh, you know, Biden's going to tax the 1%. And, you know, I've read a bunch of different articles, and who knows, because he's not president, so he can't really do anything right now. A lot of the articles I've seen have said that Biden is going to increase taxes on basically people making $400,000 plus a year. Now, most of the people, as you well know, that make $400,000+ a year are people that probably own companies. Now, when those people's taxes go up and they start spending a lot more money in taxes, what's to stop them from moving out of country? Canada, China, Korea, wherever. And at that point, all of the people that they then had as employees that were making money and paying taxes out of their paychecks are now left jobless. And that creates more tension because they're stressed on a regular basis. That creates more issues where we need government programs to try and help people out. And then at that point, all those people that were in the $400,000+ range are now moving out of country with their businesses. And I feel like that tax increase for everything that he wants to do then drops down to the responsibility of the people making under 400,000, which is more than likely most of the people that we all associate with, hang out with, spend time with, and know. And at that point, I mean, when you really think about it beyond, we're just going to tax the hell out of the 1%ers. When you think about the long term of that and the possibilities of the other way that that could turn around, it almost seems like we could potentially be going for another recession.
Stacey?
So we could potentially be going for another recession because we had a pandemic, obviously, and that made the economy take a heavy blow. But It's my understanding that when he says that he's going to tax people who make over 400,000, that's mostly corporate. He said he would increase the corporate tax from 21 to 28% because they're barely paying taxes, meaning that a teacher is paying more in taxes than a millionaire, which is crazy. So when the news came out of President Trump's taxes coming out and that he's only paid $750 and he's had a lot of write-offs because he's been able to show he has a lot of debt and more liabilities and assets, he was able to do that. So as we know, corporations have a lot of ways to get write-offs. There's a lot of tax breaks. There's a lot of tax codes and loopholes to where they don't pay as much in taxes. And that's been the issue for years, which is what I can see Joe Biden is trying to address. He's trying to balance the taxation because he's saying that people who are considered to be lower class, working class, and middle class are paying more in taxes than the wealthy elite when they are dominating more of the money from the economy. So they should be paying more if we're going to do this in an equitable way. And I also recall that there was some tax codes being implemented that would actually have punitive implications behind it if you do take your business overseas, from my understanding, which was encouraging them to stay here, to keep everything here. Now, I'll admit, President Trump has done some decent things with the economy, but he also inherited a decent economy. When Obama and Biden left office, things were on an upswing. So he kind of came into a positive swing with unemployment rates going down and employment going up. So it wasn't like he had to come in on the cusp of a crisis like how President Obama and Biden did. When they came in, they literally was running into a recession. Like literally the economy was going like this and they had to kind of bring it back up and get through a recession and then come back up to where we're at today. So President Trump had mentioned that the economy is like in a V shape right now, like it was up and then it went down because of the pandemic and it's going back up. And then Joe Biden said it's like a K because he's saying that for people who are in the wealthy elite, they made a lot of money during the pandemic, whereas people who are lower and working class are going down, struggling to come back up. So that, looking at those perspectives, you have to address it from a more accurate mirror. So when you hear Joe Biden say, I'm going to raise tax on the 1%, that comes across as, well, that may be more equitable than raising tax on the middle class or the lower class because we're already struggling to pay our bills and come out of debt. So, right. That's my theory on it.
No,
go ahead.
There's so much to fact check with when it comes to economics. I throw my hands up at it. But I think a couple of things are very important to mention about Joe Biden's tax increases. Yes, there is tax increase. It gets kind of muddy in there. But I think one important element I agree. I understand your idea, Brandon, that there'll be some form of ripple effect.
Right.
If I get taxed and money comes out of my pocket, I'm taking money out of other people's pockets. But there was a breakdown of the potential tax increases, and it is projected that 54% of the tax change will fall on the top 0.1% of the income distribution, corresponding to an average tax increase of more than 1.3 million. But so what that's saying is over half of the tax increases would only happen or would not affect 99.9% of Americans. And as a human that taught statistics, that would be considered well below statistically significant numbers.
Yeah.
That was a statistical slam dunk.
Yeah.
Right?
Because that 0.005 and 0.001 was that statistical significance when we were in stats.
So meaning that increase or the impact on that group wouldn't matter. But but it is talking about individual tax rate would increase from 37% to 39.6. Corporate tax rate would increase from 21 to 28%. Just being in public sector, and I've been a part of many bonds and millages that have to be passed through schools. A lot of times it balances out, where it's also a price for services, but it'll be taxes that a lot of people don't see. But also, as we know from our taxes, and as Doc was explaining, it's a lot of things that they'll be able to write off. As soon as that money comes out of their bank account, they'll get it back the next year. So it's just one thing that you learn with business is once you get taxed on whether you're a small business owner or a major corporation. Once you get taxed on it, start donating, start spending your money for your business because it's all write-off. That's why every
start foundations and all that.
Every NFL player has a foundation. You
They
want to know
sure
why?
do.
Absolutely.
Because they're going to run a camp, and that camp is going to be free for everybody. But the expenses for that camp are going to be about $200,000.
Right on.
You guys keep going back and forth. I'm going to use the restroom real quick.
Okay.
I'm just checking numbers and data. This is great. But
I
I
do
got my
appreciate-
note sheet.
I love it. I love it.
I got,
You know,
I'm like on NFL Network. I got my Surface Pro.
but see, that's the thing that kills me. It's like, you know, we talk about the economy, we talk about, you know, the upswing of the country and how he was saying at that town hall meeting how we were so close to unity before COVID.
Yes.
And, you know, like that's not the issue though, because like what really turned the tide racially in this country was Floyd. When people had to watch him die on camera, you couldn't look away. So it became a situation where now it had to be acknowledged. You couldn't ignore it or say it doesn't exist because it's right in front of your eyes. And that was the tipping point. You know, COVID forced more people to be home to see it happen.
Right.
You know, but you can't put the collapse on COVID. Like, you know, they were armed in our state, in Michigan, you know, at the Capitol.
Right.
That's a show of force. You know,
and
you
he
can
said
say
that he thinks those are
protest.
fine people. That they're fine people. They just want to be free. That's what he said. He said they just
Right.
don't want their liberties attacked. Those are
We
fine.
don't want to get killed by the police. They don't want to wear a mask. These are not comparable things. To say that, you know, you can have the same level of force to protest with. So I'm gonna step back again. Brandon's back. Go ahead. You know, continue. I'm loving it. I'm loving it.
Did you have some more questions, Brandon, for me?
Doc, how do you feel about Joe Jorgensen?
Say it one more time.
Good stuff, man. This is
The
great.
independent candidate.
Yes.
Right? The independent, yes. Okay, so I'm going to be transparent. I was excited to see women on my ballot. I'm just being, you know, transparent. I was excited to see women. I was excited to see Joe. I was excited to see the other candidate. I have them written down somewhere where it's 2 Black women on the ballot. I was excited to see them. The downfall in my spirit is that we have a 2-party dominated system. So it's extremely difficult for a third party to even make a tremble, right? No one has done that since Ross Perot, and we were kids when that happened.
Right.
And he garnered like 19%. So it's very difficult in this 2-party system for a third party to break through because that's how our political system is built. And it's very difficult to change the status quo, to have any type of radical change. I would love to see more independent parties make an imprint because we do not have to be a 2-party dominant system. We can literally
We don't
shift
have
and
to be
shape
left
that.
or right.
Yeah, we don't have to be. You can be moderate, libertarian, Green Party. You know, you can be those things because those things may actually align more closely with your beliefs. Because that's the difficult part during elections. Like I often say, if you look at this, like you put out a job description and these are the criteria and the things you want the candidate to do for you. And so you look at their platforms to see if they align with your job description and you have to pick which ones align the best. Because unfortunately, when you vote for the third party, it gets lost. It's almost like a lost vote because the 2 parties are so dominant, it doesn't make an impact. Like they typically get between 1.5 to 4% of the votes overall. That's
everybody watching.
That's nominal.
I don't mean to interrupt. Everybody watching, just so you're aware, Doc was not saying that if you don't want to vote for Trump or Biden, don't go vote because it doesn't matter. It's still fucking
not
matters.
saying that.
Do it.
I would never say that. I am a strong proponent for voting. Every vote counts. Every vote matters. Please exercise your right to vote. Do not sit this one out.
If everybody that thought Trump's a douchebag and Joe Biden seems to show signs of possible dementia, and you said, I really don't care about either candidate, and everybody that felt that way at some point went and voted for Jorgensen, she would probably win.
Yeah. Real quick, this is just information, talking about third-party candidates. Ross Perot ran for election in 1992.
Right. During the Clinton.
Didn't he run like 10 times?
That was his
Yes.
most successful time.
That was
though.
his most successful.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, didn't he run like quite a few times and
Yeah.
still like never came close?
Right. But
Now, I'm just curious.
but
because-
just want to throw it in.
yeah.
I know one controversial topic was why can't Joe Jorgensen get on the debate stage, and it was actually brought to circuit court in D.C. this year, and the court declined the rules to determine who makes the presidential debate stage from the
I think Joe
Libertarian.
Jorgensen would probably dominate both of them.
But people said, well, the three-panel or judge panel said that it doesn't violate any FEC rules for being on the stage, and they offered a 13-page opinion on their decision. It's not against the law for, honestly, news entities to only have two candidates from the primary two parties in the country to debate.
I guess here's my response to that is the debate the other night.
Mhm.
Why does that have to? First off, again, yes, from what I've seen and heard, it was a complete shit show, and probably showed honestly why both candidates have terrible standpoints on certain things or lack thereof, I guess. Why is it impossible for, an independent candidate to reach out to somebody else, or especially with how big social media is? If I'm Jorgensen, I'm straight up going to be like, listen, on such and such date from such and such time, I'm going to be on stage talking to people. I would love it if either one of the other two major presidential candidates would show up and just discuss some of these topics with me. Why does it have to be a sanctioned event?
Because you have to look at it from this perspective. You have these conventions. Look at what happened 4 years ago. It's documented evidence that Hillary Clinton went to the head of the Democratic National Convention and said, what ways can we undermine Bernie Sanders?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So you have a machine basically created to put someone in the presidency. You have two of them. They are very powerful and they get what they want. So it's not necessarily a matter of doing what's best for the country. It's doing what's best for the situation. And the situation may be favors that have to be paid, which is why certain people get further than others.
Right.
So that's the issue. So like if you're trying to be independent and you don't have that backing from either of these conventions,
that capital backing,
you don't have the capital and you don't have the exposure. I can be on social media all day, but is it getting anywhere? And it's going to take an event to make it so. Someone would have to do something so boisterous to be seen and heard. Because, there are a lot of people that are watching this right now who probably don't even know who that is.
Go look her up on Google.
Oh,
look at her
But
name.
I'll even
you
throw
can
something
preview
out.
your. I don't know if y'all can see this, but you can preview your ballot on the Michigan Information Voting website. So I'm actually looking at the ballot while I'm talking to you guys. So look, Joe Jorgensen is a candidate that is running as a third-party presidential candidate, and her co-runner is Jeremy Cohen. And then it shows the Libertarian, the U.S. Taxpayers, and the Green Party. So you can literally go to their websites and see what their platform is and what their history is.
You
But
can
Vern,
you can see their standpoints on all major
Yeah, you can see
major
everything.
topics,
Vern,
everything.
Can you fact check if Ross Perot participated in one of those debates in '92? Because I think he did.
I'm
I
almost
think he was a
positive he
three.
did. Yeah.
Okay.
But the one thing also, I'm looking at comments and things like that. The other thing is you still have the right to advertisements, ads, things like that. So it goes back to what Doc is talking about. The finances for national spots, third parties they don't have to. You can't run an ad during the middle of an NFL game without millions of dollars.
I agree,
but
but at the same time,
Jorgensen did call out both the president and former Vice President Biden to pretty much, she challenged them on Twitter to let her into the debate if they wanted to have.
And neither one of them will do it because I think both of them are afraid of the fact that people would finally see who she is, what she's about, and the fact that she kind of takes, based on what I've seen, she kind of seems like a little bit of good from both sides.
Moderate. She's like a moderate.
She's about as in the middle as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things, like, I know you're talking about, like, the capital backing and all that kind of stuff. One of the things that bothers me about that is, personally, I'm one of those people where, like, if I'm trying to watch a football game, baseball game, NBA game, whatever it is, and a freaking ad comes on about politics, I'm getting up to make a drink, getting up to use the bathroom. I'm getting up to go run 2 miles if I have to, even though I hate running. I don't care. I'm doing whatever I have to do to not watch that. As big as social media platforms are, Twitter, Facebook, whatever else you want to use, a lot of people watch Twitch, Twitch TV, YouTube TV, things like that. You cannot tell me that she cannot make some kind of stand on those platforms. Like, it can't be that hard to log into your own Facebook and say, you know what, I'm going to go live for the next 8 hours and just answer people's questions.
Very true. But go back to 2 weeks ago, or even a week ago, when we were talking about the impact of celebrities and entertainers and their message and how you didn't want to see that stuff during the game. That's a platform instantly of millions of people installed. They know at this particular time, they're all tuning in, they're all going to be there to see whatever message you have.
Right.
Whereas when you get into the digital era, an arena, it's not that concise. It's a lot harder to get those people all together at once without already having a platform for a message that people are aware of. So whereas her supporters can share it and, get that message out there, it only bleeds so far. Whereas if you have an ad spot in the middle of a game, in the middle of, whatever big hot TV show is on right now, you have an installed audience who is going to see that message. I sit at work, I hear the TV outside of my office all day, back and forth, just literally nonstop with these commercials. And then you have the random John James or, Steven commercial. So it's like you get that nonstop. And it's like, okay, I don't have the money to flood the market with this media. I don't. I can only go so far on social media. And again, it would take someone like Jorgensen literally walking on the lawn of the White House wearing a poster of who she is and what she's about and getting arrested for it to get on the news for people to actually know, okay, I know who that is now. So now when I see something on social media, I can recall it and then want to know more and look further into it. You have to have that broad spectrum to start to get the interest there. Because a grassroots internet, bred campaign can only go so far. So, where Perot hit that, high mark, you might get 20. Maybe.
So
that's because he was a billionaire, though. That's why he
did
that.
My response to that mainly being, though, is, okay, so let's take, hey, fact checker, what's the average age of a U.S. American citizen currently?
Like 30, hold on, I'll get back to that. I just wanted to throw in some more Ross Perot information. You all are educating me with the questions, and that's what the whole purpose of this is. First, Ross Perot's net worth at his death was still $4.1 billion, making him the 167th richest person in the world. He passed away last year, rest in peace, Ross Perot, July 9th of 2019 at 89 years old. I'm sorry, his net worth in 1992 was still around $4 billion. And with inflation over the last 28 years, that is kind of equating to about $2 billion more for inflation. But some other stats about Ross Perot's presidential race, a lot of commentary says that he may be the reason why Bush did not win a second term, is because
he distracted some of that vote.
He got. He received I'm just rounding up, 19% of the popular vote. He finished second in 2 states, so on and so forth, which, as we know through the Electoral College, you losing key states because someone is taking votes out of them, that is a big hindrance to you. But looking at the United States presidential election results, Clinton had 370 electoral votes. Bush had 168, but it still comes back. Clinton won that by 6% almost, 6 points. And when you're looking at 19 points went to Ross Perot, that is a huge swing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Back in 1992. But again, going back to Joe Jorgensen, it's a great platform to be in, except for, again, money comes with running for a presidential election, just like Mike Bloomberg got into the election and spent almost $500 million in a few weeks just to get on the debate stage.
I guess the thing that I'm trying to bring up, and I'm just going to take a guess, I would say, most of the United States, if you take like an average age of most people, you're probably late 30s, early 40s, somewhere around there would be my guess. And then you look at like a lot of the people on social media as far as Facebook and Twitter, which are the two biggest platforms. Most of the people on those are going to be somewhere between like 18 and 27, I would guess. If you're looking for people to vote that are going to make a change, that want to hear things, that want to see change and all that, you're going to want to reach out to the younger crowd. Now, I understand Johnny's point where, okay, you're watching an NFL football game. Let's say there's 10 million people watching that same football game and that commercial comes on. I'd be willing to bet half of those people are like, I'm so tired of these damn commercials, and they don't even pay attention to it anymore. Now, you're talking about, let's say, 10 million people watching that game. How quickly does something that goes on social media spread? We've seen people that have posted something and within a week has had over 100 million views.
Sorry.
You can get on social media and do that for free.
I was off 10 years. The average age of eligible U.S. voters, which is the obvious demographic we're really looking at, just not Americans, is 47.5 years old.
Right, which is a little bit under. I would say most people on social media are going to be in the late
those Gen X people, they're Triple H in it.
Right now, you've got a decent percentage of people that are under the age of 50 that are on social media, not nearly as active. But to take your platform and put it on social media and say, hey, I'm going to do a 4-hour window of just answering people's questions. And those people share that information and people find out who she is that had no idea that she was even running or what her name was or anything or what she stands for. Within weeks, that could be hundreds of millions of views. And 50+% of those people would have never even considered taking the time to look and find out who she was.
But you really need something to garner that interest. That's the thing. Because, like, I can be on social media as we are right now, and we're talking about her because this is social media. But again, you need something to get people to want it to be viral. And that's the thing. So, like, I can't really break out of this type of scenario, but it's almost as if she'd need to do something like a member of the Jackass crew,
right,
to get people to recognize that she exists, one, to then carry that interest into social media where it would gain more traction. Because, like, if you're just, I'm a politician, I want to say these things, I want to answer these questions, people are kind of against that because, again, they don't want to deal with the political standpoint right now because it's not interesting and it's frustrating. So, she would really need to do something in the public eye to get the traction she needs on social media to truly make a dent. Because all it takes is one meme. If someone took that Leonardo DiCaprio meme and put her face on it and changed the meme in that way, that would be enough. Even though it has nothing to do with politics, it has nothing to do with the presidential election, it's getting her out there.
Now, because this show kind of started with people sharing memes and, doing what they do on social media without, like, looking into how factual information is and stuff, which is, I feel like, what really led to this whole thing. Would it not be enough for her to just get on social media and start posting things like, tired of the Trump and Biden crap? Take a look at what I can do. Or post something that says, the hell with both of them. You don't care about either one of them, or you like a little bit of both. see what I can do.
I'll kind of
Go
give
ahead.
some perspective on age demographics with social media. As we probably can already assume, the average age of a Facebook user is 40 years old.
Wow.
0.5. That's the average age of a Facebook user. And without just taking up too much time, because I know we're running against the clock, pretty much you go down different forms of social media, and those ages start to drastically drop from Instagram to Twitter. And I won't even make a joke about where you wind up with TikTok.
All right. And I guess my main point is if I'm a
Not
presidential
eligible
candidate,
voters.
yeah, if I'm a presidential candidate, the people that I want to reach are the younger people. And the reason that I say that is because the people that are 60 plus years old, like, and I'm not saying this to be rude to anybody because I have family members that are elderly and whatnot, but those people grew up in a totally different time. And a lot of those people are unaccepting of the changes that are trying to be made in this country, just because change is scary for a lot of people. And when you've lived 60 plus years under a certain kind of way of life, it's hard to just accept those big changes. So, I mean, you would think that you would want to reach the younger group of people, because those are the people that are going to be voting for the next 30, 40, 50 years. Whereas people that are 60 plus years old may only have 10, 15, 20, 25 years left of, voting. And they're so stuck in their ways that, we want progress. To have progress, you have to be open-minded. Most people, the older you get, the less open-minded you are.
Okay. Who you got, Stacey? I know it's been a while, and I don't want you to feel left.
Oh, I was just listening, but Brandon, what you're saying is statistically proven. A lot of analysts are saying that you want to target the younger voters because there are, for lack of better words, the more revolutionary voters right now, because they're more active in participating in political matters and social issues. So you do want to target the 18 to 30 or the 18 to 27-year-olds. That's true. Now, to me, for a third-party candidate to try to really break this two-party system, they have to start campaigning now for 2024. Like, their strategy has to start now, because it takes a lot of funding and a lot of recognition and putting in work to get yourself recognized. So she would have to do kind of like how an independent artist does for maximum exposure, and use social media, obviously, and use YouTube, get interviews on the main TV shows, on the main news networks, start being more vocal on her views on everything that's happening, for her to break, or for them or him, whoever, to break that two-party. That's my theory, to break this two-party dominated system. And they also would have to take this time to get that capital backing so they can have those type of advertisements and buy their way into those platforms. It sounds crazy that you have to buy your way, but we live in a capitalist country. Economics is just at the forefront. So you're going to have to do that. So that's what I think. I would like to see that. There are other countries that have multiple parties. For example, South Africa has like 13 political parties, and they're represented at different levels. So like some are like just 2%, 10%, 12%, 5%, but it creates more diversity to where you can have your views recognized and represented accurately. You don't have to compromise and say, well, my views are a little bit different, but this candidate is more closely, so I'm gonna have to go with this candidate, because if I go with this candidate, chances are I'm not going to see anything change or any of my views or policy initiatives represented, because they're not able to do that, or they don't stand a chance in this two-party system. That's my theory on it.
Yeah, I'm just tired of everyone in the country saying, oh, I'm going Democrat or I'm going Republican, because in the last several elections, it honestly just kind of comes down to my thoughts, which is I feel like we're just constantly being stuck voting between the lesser of two evils.
All right, just going over a couple of final numbers. I'm just going to make it quick. Last presidential election, or the last couple of presidential elections, Libertarian Party's kind of success in voting. Gary Johnson and with his running mate William Weld received 3.29% of the vote. Gary Johnson and Jim Gray in 2012 received 0.99%, so 1% of the vote. In 2008, Bob Barr was 0.4%. Michael Badnarik in 2004 was 0.32%. So other than in 1980, Ed Clark and David Koch receiving 1% of the vote, there is only one time, and that was in 2016, that the Libertarian Party received over 1% of the vote.
And
that's what I was
Kanye
saying.
West will get more than that just because
Kanye
he's
will
famous.
probably, let me tell you, Kanye will probably get 5% because
He's famous.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, but because of that's just
Man,
what our two
come on,
parties
libertarians, I might join.
The independent parties literally
Underdog.
usually get between 1 to 4%. 4% is like a victory for them. It'll probably be a while before we even see a Ross Perot type of victory. We can get like 19, 20% because of how the two-party system is
Right.
dominated. In a dream world,
That's
it
what's
would be
amazing
great.
about Ross Perot.
Yeah,
more.
yeah, it
He
is.
got
And that was
19%.
before social media.
And libertarians have not even gotten a combined 10% if you add up every election since.
It really boils down to who you are, though, because you take a guy like, let's say, Dwayne Johnson decided to throw his hat in.
Mhm.
I'm the Rock. It would take
Terrible idea.
two posts on social media, and he could get that Ross Perot number. He could.
He
You know,
could probably. He probably could.
You take some of these, sensationalist people, they can get that because they have the backing and they have the exposure. So that's why you take a person like Joe, who maybe needs to start rubbing elbows with those people, not necessarily for their money, but for their exposure. Like, hey, this is The Rock. I'm on Twitter. Check out this person. Now she's getting exposure. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's almost not even political what you have to do to put yourself in a position to be political. Because people just don't know who you are, and they don't really have the means or desire to find out unless it's thrown in their face by something that would catch. And that's honestly what it would take. If she went on Monday Night Raw and stepped into the middle of the ring and cut a promo on Raw, that would be enough to get her.
She's just got to DDT somebody.
But you know who could have won as a libertarian? Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders probably could have won as a libertarian, because he really truly identifies closer to libertarian than he does Democrat, but he just kind of goes Democrat by default because of the two-party system. But if he really, really wanted to run as a libertarian, I think enough people would support him to where he can either break the two-party system or he might actually have a chance at winning, because he had a lot of young supporters in particular, a lot of
that were very dejected when he endorsed Hillary Clinton.
I know.
That was a terrible idea on his part. Two things really quick. First off, if Get to the Choppa can win governor of California, anybody's got a chance. I'm just throwing that out there.
But again, he's famous. If he could run for president, if he was born in this country, he could win.
He was famous
that's the thing.
He was famous for terrible movies.
But nevertheless, a lot of people.
We're not going to get into a discussion of slandering Arnold Schwarzenegger. That is too difficult for this.
That's too difficult for the show.
But what I'm saying is a celebrity has the backing through exposure to make more of an impact than a grassroots candidate. So it's not just financial. It's also celebrity. And it's unfortunate because to be president in this country, you have to have
money.
Standing that the average person doesn't have, so to tell the average person they can be president is a fallacy. And that is another reason why I think a lot of people were drawn to Trump, because even though he's rich, he is still considered a person. He's a person. So it's like you can identify with this person that you've seen outside of the political arena and say, okay,
not a career politician.
Maybe I could get there. If I got on TV and became famous, maybe I could run for president. So now it's gone from I can work hard, learn, and be educated and become president to now I can be famous enough to be president.
I have a bet. This is my second thing. I have $20 for each of you if Joe Jorgensen doesn't break 10%.
Oh. We'll be back on November 4th. No, I'm saying.
My question was this. It's funny, going back to the Ross Perot thing, who is she going to be taking votes from? Because a lot of people say Gary Johnson took votes from Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. Who is Joe Jorgensen going to be taking votes from? And I think one tough thing is those Democratic states, she's not selling anything to those Democratic states. That even Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania that went to Trump in 2016, he's not really doing a good job of, hey, I like you. That's just my opinion. But I don't see her
she's pulling votes from both.
I think she will pull from both.
I don't know that it's necessarily pulling votes, but I think that they would get votes that were not going to get placed.
Right.
You know, it's like you had that also the large segment of people who are just refusing to vote because it's like my vote is that I'm not voting for either of these guys because I don't believe in it. So that is my voice. There are a lot of people that feel that way. And I think if you had another option, you'd get those people in. So if you're getting those people back and in the booths, in addition to pulling some votes from people who want to vote Democrat but really don't like some of the stuff Biden's doing or are Republican and just don't like Donald Trump, because there's a large segment of people that are that way too, you're pulling a lot of votes that would potentially gain steam. But it's, again, you got to get out there, because I would love to see a show of hands in my comment section of how many people actually know who that is.
Oh,
you know,
I see her pulling votes from both, and the only reason I say that is
we have. Yeah. I'll add to this. My boy Justin Brenner was in the comments. Justin has been talking about George Jorgensen for a smooth portion of 2019, 2020. George Frisch is another buddy of mine. He's an avid Joe Jorgensen fan. So I'll be honest, because of, I think Johnny, Brandon, Doc, you know, the reason why this started, I've interacted with so many people that would identify as moderate, and I will say they are fed up, and they have taken what you're saying, Brandon. They have taken action to figure out who. I don't like career politicians, but what they're saying in 2020 is I don't like the two-party system, and they're looking for Joe Jorgensen.
Yeah, and that's why I say I feel like she's pulling votes from both sides. The main reason being, I'll be openly honest, I voted for Trump in the last election, and I have been leaning more towards the Joe Jorgensen, because some of the things that he has said, some of the things that he's had lack of action on, things like that, like some of the things he said about military. With me being prior military, I'm just kind of like, ouch, that's kind of a slap in the face. Like, I really felt like you supported the military. And some of the comments he's made are just blatantly disrespectful towards people that have a military background. But then at the same time, I'm upset with him about those things, but I'm also not that kind of person that's like, you know, I'm just going to jump over to Biden's side, because there's a lot of things about, like, a lot of his weapon policies that he feels, and a lot of the things about how,
Look at Johnny's face. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Student loan forgiveness, and, you know, doctors shouldn't make millions of dollars, and, you know, free healthcare and free this and free that. It's like, I also don't feel like we should be paying taxes to just give handouts to people either. I work hard for my money, and I want to keep the money that I make. So when you have someone that's blatantly disrespectful to something that hits home, like military people, but then you have the other candidate that's like, well, we just want to give free to everybody on, you know, basic things like healthcare and college tuition and stuff like that. It's like, no, I want to keep my money because I worked hard for it.
I hear you. And if anyone wants to have a difficult discussion with me about gun rights in this country, please feel free. We can do it offline. We don't have to be online, but I'm just letting you know that the option is always out there. Feel free. So I hear what you're saying. I totally hear what you're saying, and I do appreciate it. We did run a little long today, but however, we started a little late. So I'm going to give everybody some closing arguments, because I really appreciate the fact that we've, you know, spread some information here in regards to candidates, potentially, hopefully, addressing another option with people that were not previously aware. So I will start with our fact checker. You did a fantastic job tonight, Vernon. I really appreciate it. Any closing thoughts?
No, I think this is a good discussion, because we wind up in the comments talking about two candidates, and we really are talking over each other. I've seen Democrats and Republicans talk about what the other party's failure is with their candidate, and actually getting into the discussion about what's really facts, what's really happened, what intents have happened. get our political views out there, and even the discussion led to a third-party candidate. So maybe Brandon bringing her up, we'll get our how many people have viewed this, get our couple hundred people.
I'll
some
take
more
that
insight
VP
on
spot
the
if she wants to give it to me for boosting her numbers a little bit.
Yep. But that's it. Hey, when we meet again on a Thursday.
Thank you. Brandon, what do you have to say to close?
I hope everybody picked up some information. I hope everybody understands that it's not a two-party system. I think that, look at all of the options as far as candidates. Look at, inside yourself at what your beliefs are. Look at all of the candidates to see what their beliefs are. You don't have to settle for Democrat. You don't have to settle for Republican. You don't have to go independent. There's failures in every aspect. There's positives in every aspect, but you have to do at the end of the day what's best for you and your family. But don't fall into the crack and say, well, I'm just not going to vote because I don't like the two candidates that have the best chance at winning. And don't settle for voting for the lesser of two evils. That's not the right way to do things.
Very, very important points. Stacey, it has been a pleasure to have you here tonight. I would love to get your closing thoughts.
I want to just take a minute to highlight that we're not just voting for president, okay? So don't forget that we're voting for local and state. We're voting for state reps. We're voting for judges. We're voting for commissioners. We're voting for trustees, for board of governors, proposals, millages. It's very important that you exercise your right to vote. It just really grieves my spirit when everybody just focuses on the president, because in all honesty, your local elected officials impact your daily quality of life the most. Like the judges that we have impacts your life the most. At some point, all of us or someone we love is going to come before a judge. So that is important. Like the judicial branch is actually the silent killer. Like when I say that they're the most powerful, they check and balance the legislative and the executive. They shape history. Okay. So when a president is elected, he doesn't just appoint Supreme Court justices. He actually appoints federal judges across the board at all levels. Okay. So President Trump has appointed over 200 federal judges since he's been in office. He's only been in office for less than 4 years. We have 870. There's 67 vacancies right now. That shifts history in a way. So you got to pay attention. Governors appoint judges too at the state level. When we're voting, we are not just voting for ourselves. We're voting for our families, our communities, and the generations to come. Please exercise your right to vote. Do not just say, I'm turned off by the presidential candidates, I'm not voting. Go vote. Preview your ballot. Do your research. All of these candidates have websites. Literally, go on their websites, see what they're about, see their track record, their history, and their platform, and make an informed decision. You pick the best candidate that you want to do the best job that you think is right for you, yourself, and your family. That's it.
Thank you so much. Guys, this was great. I really appreciate it. And I'm hoping that we can get some new blood on next week. I'm still looking for guests. This has just really been incredible to be able to sit back and watch and appreciate it and learn some things. So I will say, just like our first week, this wasn't the most difficult of discussions, but it was informative nonetheless. Brandon, you look like you got something to say.
Just so anybody that is watching live or anybody that ends up watching this video after the fact, coming on this show, it's informative, it's educational. I mean, at first, I'm not going to lie, the first time I was on, which is now 3 times in a row, I was kind of nervous. It's really not that bad. I mean, yeah, you're on camera, but you're having normal conversations with normal people about things that are important and affect your day-to-day life, what you see on the news, what you hear on the radio, what affects your community. This is not a scary place. Like, it's okay to just be yourself, talk about how you feel, answer questions, ask questions, learn something.
I would certainly hope people understand that, but I've felt, personally, I dealt with someone that I've known a very long time, over 15 years. And they made a meme post relating to Black Lives Matter and like gay pride in a school. And I commented on it and literally was told I'm attacking them, calling them racist, and they blocked me. And I'm telling you, I've known this person for 15 years. And I'm like, at no point did I slander them. At no point did I say anything derogatory. I just simply said, hey, you know, stating that your life matters or having pride in who you are shouldn't be a problem. You know, that's it. And they couldn't process that. They saw it as an attack on them because they were saying something that's considered a hot take. And anyone contrary to that, they feel like, okay, well, now I'm the villain. And what I'm trying to do here is not create heroes and villains. You know, if you are in the Klan and you want to come on here and have a discussion about the Klan and why you feel that they're great, I welcome you with open arms to do so, because this is a safe place. I want to understand. I really want to know why you feel the way you do. Maybe it will help me on my journey in some way. But again, we can't do that if people aren't willing to come on and talk, be it camera shy, you know, things of that nature. Like, this is a safe place. We have love. You know, we have love for everybody. And I want to get people here who want to spread their message and why they feel the way they do, regardless of whether you think I agree or not, because that's not important, whether I agree. We may starkly disagree with each other. But again, I am giving you an open platform to get that message to people who otherwise would not hear it because they don't inherently agree with you. And maybe, just maybe, you can get some, you know, common ground with those people and understand and come together, because that's what we all need to do, is come together. Everybody's at odds because nobody wants to talk to each other unless we agree. And that's not how communication works. We do not have to agree with each other to have communication with each other.
Right.
You know, how many people don't like their bosses, but they go there and work every day because they have to? There's no reason why we can't coexist, even though we disagree. I don't care who you vote for. I personally don't know who I'm going to vote for. It's a very tough election for me this year. And yes, I did vote for Donald Trump 4 years ago. You can hate me if you want, but I did not want Hillary Clinton in office because I did not agree with her message and her position and her activity at the time. So, like I said, if you want to come on the show, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to have you here. It is a safe place, regardless of what you feel your message is. Do not be afraid to come and have a talk about it. That's all we're asking, is let's talk. Sorry, guys, I've kept you up, you know, too late. I do appreciate it again. We'll be out here next week.
You've been on 3 times.
3 feet, you know, so we're going to have another topic for next week, and we'll put it out there. I did open up a specific page for difficult discussions where we can have topics brought up, you know, for the show for future episodes. So if you want to check that out, you can link to my page and go to Difficult Discussions and check it out. So have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Have a good night, guys.
Good talk.